And welcome back to another week of Inside the Paint, redrecover.com, our sponsor. I'm Ira Winderman from the South Florida Sun Sentinel, where it's 9 a.m.-ish, and I'm fine and I'm awake, and that's Kurt Helin at about 6 a.m. or so out in Los Angeles for Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com. And just when you think we'd be in the doldrums and there'd be nothing to talk about 2 weeks before the start of camp, next week, our last show before camp opens, I'll be joining you from training camp 2 Wednesdays from now, and it'll get real. We get the Robert Sarver bombshell. And I'm trying to localize this, although not the reprehensible activity, to sort of give some perspective, Kurt. And my question to you is this. Just so people know, and I'm not going through the allegations, because I don't think even redrecover.com would want us to use those kind of words.
No.
There were a bunch of misogynistic, sexist, and just reprehensible things that have been chronicled for years and years and years by majority owner Robert Sarver of the Phoenix Suns, to the point the NBA has suspended him for 1 year, fined him $10 million, and my thought is still look for a smoking gun to force him out the way they did Donald T. Sterling. My question to Kurt is, from a basketball standpoint, especially since you have a player like Jay Crowder interested in the Heat, possibly wanting to get out from the Suns. Kurt, a couple of things here. Number one, do you think Phoenix Suns players can report to camp in about 10 days as business as usual? And what do you expect from inside the player/coaching camp of the Phoenix Suns?
That is going to be one of the more interesting questions, because Chris Paul is kind of a leader in this front, right? I mean, you were talking about the former head of the Players Union and a guy who isn't afraid to stand up to ownership, but will he stand up to the guy who signs the paychecks here? I fear, as somebody who, like you, thinks that it sounds like thinks the league went light on Sarver here.
Yes.
That he's going to show up and think, we're not thinking, but say, look, man, I'm just here about the basketball. That's a league issue. This is a contending team, or look, they won 64 games last year. We can debate where they are in the contention list in a deeper West now, but this is a very good team with a chance. He is going to be 37, 38 and trying to, get those. He's not got a lot of chances left. And then he's going to look at, they're just going to be, and I'm pretty sure Monty Williams will come in and say the same thing, which is, that was reprehensible. The league has settled on a fine. That's fine, and punishment. That's fine. I want to move ahead. If they do that, if there's not a pushback from, what got Donald Sterling in trouble, beyond, like you said, it starts with the actual, it's just the visceral reaction you got to listening to that audio, right? Sponsors started pulling out, player backlash. I mean, they almost boycotted that game, but you also had LeBron at the time and all these other players going, there's just no spot for Sterling in our league. You had all these players stepping up. I don't think it's an accident, Ira, that the NBA dropped this week, in the deadest week of the NBA season, when nobody's around to, if they dropped this even during training camp in 3 weeks, you would have been asking Heat players about it. You would be on that.
And probably still will. And Kurt, all I kept thinking about was how the Suns were basically the favorite last season for most of the season to win the title. Mm-hmm. And what would have been the visual of Adam Silver presenting the championship trophy to Robert Sarver, and that would have been the photo we all would have used yesterday when we were writing about this story. Part two to me is this. So let's say you have someone like a Jay Crowder, beloved 1 year Heat player, helped get him to the 2020 NBA Finals, has been all over social media hinting not so subtly about how maybe if you guys want to go with Cam Johnson and go younger, I can go somewhere else. And hey, I live over there in Miami, wouldn't mind that. He's been pretty clear about that. Even retweeted Ira Winderman, thank you, helping grow the social media follower count. What if a player goes into camp and uses this as a little bit of a bargaining tool? So Jay Crowder shows up the first day of Suns camp and says, I cannot play for an organization that is still owned by this person, even though he is on a 1 year suspension. There's no real recourse for the NBA. What does the NBA do with a player like that who chooses to make a stand, or even on a higher moral ground, another player who says any owner who uses the N-word is not someone who I can help finance his business? What does the NBA do then, Kurt?
Yeah, I wouldn't, by the way, be shocked if Jay in particular is using this as he's like you said, he wanted out well before this dropped. I think in that case, I don't know that the NBA can. He's pushing his way out. I think they're going to accommodate the request because I get a sense the league would like this to just go away. That's part of again why I think it dropped when it dropped, so that by the time we get to training camp, we've already discussed the second and third Dolphins games and whatever else is going on in the world by that point, and in the sports world by that point. We're getting close to baseball playoffs and all that stuff. They are hoping the focus spotlight moves away really quickly so that when training camp opens, people can dodge this question once and move on, including the Suns. I don't know that I'm comfortable letting that happen, but if somebody steps forward and says, hey, this isn't acceptable, I think you're going to see that player get moved pretty quickly. And if they want to make that broader statement that you did, I think that's what's really interesting here is that I still think part of the reason Sarver got the punishment he got is that there's a lot of owners in glass houses who don't want to start throwing stones, Ira. There are a lot.
You know what?
And I don't think that's Miami, but I think there are plenty of others.
No, I'm going to interrupt you right here because I'm going to the chat board, our YouTube chat board. Feel free to join us here at Inside the Paint, redrecover.com, our sponsor. And Steve Rose here asked a question. He says, so the owner of the Miami Heat is so perfect, having invested millions and millions in China. Okay, we know that is the absolute sort of don't touchstone issue with the NBA, whether it was Daryl Morey or anyone else. So you're right. It's that if you sort of saying, okay, this is reprehensible, but in a totalitarian state, this is allowed to have your investments. So this whole juggling act, and we know that Adam Silver is going to talk at the Board of Governors this week. I can only imagine the legal, two-step he does there as he tries to tap dance around the whole thing. How does the NBA say, okay, this and this is reprehensible and not allowed, but this and this is sort of the cost of doing business, which we absolutely saw with the Daryl Morey issue, and almost, how this is, begging to get NBA games back in China, begging to get that NBA market going also. So how fine a line are we here? Or is misogyny and sexism and the N-word where you have to draw that hard and fast line?
I think that this is sort of slightly different situations. I think you can make the argument that if you're going to draw this moral line, you shouldn't draw that moral line. But Adam Silver has pushed the whole concept of soft diplomacy, for lack of a better word. Hey, we're going to make a bigger difference in China if we're projecting our values there by playing games, and they're seeing, Pride Night or and whatever else you want to, push out there. That's better for the league. It's also, let's just be blunt, it's really much better for the league's bottom line. Robert Sarver being the owner or not being the owner doesn't affect the NBA's bottom line that much. At least it hasn't yet. Again, if sponsors start to pull out, if this snowballs, that's a different story. As it stands now, that's part of it. That it doesn't really change anything. I think Orlando was onto something earlier when he said, in our pre-talk to the Inside the Paint Red Recover show, when he was saying it's Phoenix. It's not, which is a purple state, we'll put it kindly. But
depending who's counting the votes, and if there's any Chinese residue on the ballots,
right? But it's not Los Angeles, and like I said, I think because there's not this player pushback and this owner. I mean, it's frustrating because Donald Sterling had decades of pretty horrific stuff, and it still took a change in the commissioner and a smoking gun to get him out. I don't know that without that kind of push that anything's gonna change for Robert Sarver. And I got a feeling he kind of read the room and said, I'm going to keep my head down. What was his statement? I'm going to forget the exact wording, but basically, I don't agree with everything in there, but I accept responsibility. He's going to keep his head down for a year and just everybody's going to hope this blows over. As the league is going to draw that moral line, though, that kind of workplace intolerance is something they don't accept because that's not part of their core values. We could debate how well they're living up to that, but I think that's where the league is going to try to draw that line, even though I think for a lot of fans, that distinction is much more murky.
And I don't want to belabor this too much because I want to get back to talk about basketball and on the court.
Yeah.
But one last question about this, because I was talking to my wife about this, and she was saying, don't kid yourself, NBA players in the end chase money. NBA recruiting is not necessarily like college recruiting. Well, they will badmouth anyone, as we saw between Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban, earlier this summer. It's kind of fun, but that's another story for another sport. But so you go into free agency. Phoenix eventually gets themselves some money. Player X comes into Miami or another city, and the player goes, well, it's down to you between sort of here and Phoenix. And the owner goes, well, do you want to play for an owner who is acknowledged, is on the record legally as having used the N-word 5 times, even after he was admonished? Do you want to play for someone like that? So let me ask you this. We all have higher moral grounds. We all have certain feelings of what's right and what's not. We all have families to feed. We all have income to earn. An NBA player is only going to play for 5, maybe the best 10 years or so anyway. Will NBA players not go to Phoenix as long as Robert Sarver is the owner? Or is the fact that we knew for years Donald Sterling, even in his business practice, was a terrible, terrible, terrible person, and people still went to the Los Angeles Clippers? So let me ask you this. Next summer, we know Robert Sarver is going to be weeks away from coming back. We're going to be in Vegas Summer League during free agency, and some players going to sign with the Phoenix Suns. Do you think this will hurt free agent traffic? Or do you think for the Suns, money will talk because it seemingly talks everywhere in the NBA?
Ira, as you well know, your wife is right. Like, I don't really think
Always.
this is not going to change anything. I don't think money wise. Like you said, I mean, it wasn't just players. It wasn't just that they drafted. To use the Clippers as the example, it wasn't just that they drafted and kept Blake Griffin around. Chris Paul came there as a free agent. I think if the money's there. And that is still, by the way, a team, that's going to have to figure out who's going to evolve after Chris Paul, right? Like they're still going to have Devin Booker, they're going to have DeAndre Ayton, they're going to have this nice team on the court. They're going to be recruiting other big names to come there. I don't want to say it doesn't play a role because going back to the Clippers, Jerry West pulled that card with Kobe Bryant. Like you're going to go play with that guy? I mean,
yes.
Whatever you think of Dr. Buss and his family. It ain't that, right? Like, I think there will be a little of that, but I think at the end of the day, and this is, I think, true of Miami recruiting against Milwaukee, or that's a bad example because they're good right now, Memphis, Portland, whatever. You have certain advantages, but at the end of the day, if that other team is offering more, more playing time and more money, that's going to matter most. And Phoenix will still be able to recruit players. I don't think it changes that much unless it gets uglier.
And before we end the segment, just going back to our YouTube chat board and on our Inside the Paint, redrecover.com show, I was asked if we saw the picture of LeBron James on his crown-shaped float. Of course we did. We have social media. He's LeBron. He does it. We look at it. Quick question here from Terry, who asked, do you think Jay Crowder will be moved before camp? I don't think Phoenix has to move Jay Crowder. I don't think Jay Crowder has a lot of options right now. I think this is more of an eventual thing if Cam Johnson fits in, if they wind up. So, Kurt, training camp early in the season, Jay Crowder, where do you think he is?
I don't think it's Miami. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. I don't think it's Phoenix. I do think he wants out. I have heard, and I'm not the only person saying this, that they are really starting to lean into Cam Johnson for the offensive reasons. He shoots a better 3 ball. He's certainly, with all due respect to Jay Crowder, Cam's a little more athletic at this point in their careers. That they're leaning into that, and they're going to give Cam Johnson. Man, they didn't make any moves. They are running it back with a team that I remember the last time we saw them. Remember that game, that final game against Dallas when they got the doors blown off them in the first 6 minutes, man? That's what's next. They have got to make some changes, and Cam Johnson might be one of them. And Jay Crowder is not at the point in his career where he's not Jared Dudley, man. He wants to be out there playing. And
so real quick, because I want to get to our next segment, because I know this segment's going long. Number one, if you're the Miami Heat, would you touch your cachet of future first-round picks for Jay Crowder?
Ooh.
Yes or no questions?
Yes, if it's heavily protected.
Okay, number two, would you give up your Duncan Robinson salary cap card that might be your only way to balance a bigger trade? Yes or no?
I don't know that I'd have to, but maybe if It would be one or the other. I wouldn't do the picks. I hate to do the picks, and then I don't know what Jay makes off the top of my head.
And around Duncan Robinson money. And number 3, would you give up one of those two and a young piece like a Struce, a Yurtseven, or a Gabe Vincent in addition?
No. Now we're getting too much.
Okay,
Jay's a rental, man.
And after the break, we come back on our redrecover.com Inside the Paint show. I want to talk about personnel moves and whether we will see any more ahead of camp, whether it will be a busy preseason. And I want to start with our good Miami Heat friend, Danny Ainge, who has a lot of chips he has to unload. I'm a Jared Vanderbilt guy, and I want to get into that. I heard Evan Cohen talking about it on Sirius XM Radio. I thought that was an interesting name. So we're going to talk about shopping in Salt Lake, whether there might be Miami Heat options there, and how busy these ensuing 2 weeks before camp might be. That's after this break on redrecover.com, Inside the Paint. Ira Winderman from the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. He's Kurt Helin, out in Los Angeles from NBCSports.com and Pro Basketball Talk. We both write a lot of stuff, so click on our stuff when you get a chance. And we're back with redrecover.com Inside the Paint show. Segment 2, if you missed segment 1, go to our podcast for the Big O show, where you can hear our thoughts on Robert Sarver, where we thought the Phoenix Suns might and will go moving forward. Want to advance this now to another team and related to the Heat, and that's the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz held a press conference unlike any I'm sure I've ever heard before from this perspective, Kurt. Usually when guys move out the door, you thank them for their service, you tell them how good as soldiers they were and how much they helped. Hell, we heard it with Dion Waiters here. We heard it with James Johnson. No matter who they move out, Michael Beasley, Hassan Whiteside, they thanked them no matter what it was like before. Danny Ainge got on stage on the podium there in Utah and spoke about how it wasn't working, how there was no chemistry, how this didn't work with Rudy Gobert, it didn't work with Donovan Mitchell, and we're better off without him. And I was like, whoa. But then as I was listening, I said to myself, this does not sound like a guy who's done. This is a guy who, you know what, Kurt, people are saying he's going to tear it down to the studs. I'm not so sure he's not going to tear it down to the nails, to the baseboards, till there's nothing left. So there's a bunch of names. I'm going to throw out all these names just in order. Let me know if you disagree, Kurt, with any of these, that they might be keepers. So my thought is Bogdan Bogdanovic, Mike Conley Jr., Malik Beasley, Jared Vanderbilt.
I will say that I have heard they might keep Beasley for a while.
Young enough, right?
Right.
Young enough.
Look, the right offer, everybody's available, but I heard Beasley is one where they might hang on.
So I just think there's a bunch of names there for Utah. So my question is this. We see this before NFL camps. We see this during the preseason, the NFL. We see it in the NBA. Everyone loves their team right now. Teams are filling out. You're allowed to have a maximum of 20. The Heat have 19. Even they have another spot. But it's almost like the Heat are saying, as weird as it sounds, well, we're already have worked with Jamal Cain and Jeremy Bouye and Orlando Robinson for the last 6 weeks. They've been in the gym. These are our summer league guys. We want to give them a shot. We want to give them a shot in camp. We want to give them a shot in the preseason. And we want to see, honestly, in the G League, if we can get that sort of diamond in the rough. The Heat have 14 players under standard contract, which is all they can afford. For all those people throwing me names of other players they could bring in. They have their two-way players who are flexible. Matter of fact, we saw Atlanta this week cut one two-way player to add Jared Culver on a two-way deal. So two-way contracts are not worth the paper they're written on. They're non-guaranteed. You can have one today. You're gone tomorrow. For now, the Miami Heat have Marcus Garrett and Darius Days. Kurt, do you think we'll see any other move of personnel significance before the September 26th media day and start of camp? Or do you think once we got resolution on Donovan Mitchell, once we have resolution on Kevin Durant, everyone is saying, let's stay copacetic and see what we have. What will this next 10 days or so, do you think, bring us in the personnel market?
Nothing major, but I do think like the Jazz could move. Look, there's absolutely interest from multiple teams in Bogdanovic, who he fits a lot of places. He is a guy who can do a little shot creation, defends pretty well, can play the 3 or small 4. That's a guy you can plug and play a lot of places at a pretty affordable salary, 19 and change. That's the one guy I keep hearing. There's interest in him. There's a lot of interest in the other guy who could move before camp is Jordan Clarkson.
Very
simply
good.
Because $13 million salary, and we know what he is. You look, if you're looking for a sixth man volume scorer, and there's a lot, like, I don't want to say every team, but there's a whole lot of teams that can plug and play Jordan Clarkson tomorrow. By the way, just for fantasy players out there, I'm just going to throw this out there while we're talking about the Jazz. Colin Sexton. Like, if you play fantasy, really Colin Sexton.
Good numbers on a bad team. The Michael Porter Jr. of Utah. Yeah.
Yep. He's going to put up numbers for your fantasy team. He's not going to win a lot of games, but if you're looking for a guy in a later round who's just going to put up numbers for you.
Name I started thinking about. I was listening to Evan Cohen on NBA radio and Sirius XM, and he mentioned Jared Vanderbilt, who is a rebounding machine. Now, he might not fit the prototypic 3-and-D stretch, switchability, and things like that. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, Kurt. I know you're out there in LA. So the Miami Heat right now have Caleb Martin probably as their projected starting power forward. They have a couple other ways they can go. In game, I think they're going to play Jimmy Butler at the 4. They can go bigger.
Yeah.
But Jared Vanderbilt, am I wrong? If you can get him for something not that tangible, maybe a very much protected first rounder or more likely second rounder.
Second rounders, yeah.
Would he not be the Heat's best option as the starting power forward? Jared Vanderbilt.
Best option, maybe. I mean, like you said, he doesn't bring a lot of offense. What he brings is hustle. What he brings is rebounding. What he brings is some athleticism. I don't know if he'd be absolutely better than Caleb Martin, but he, at very worst, he is part of your rotation, right? He is going to get you minutes and provide you something of real value. I absolutely think, look, outside of Bogdanovich, personally, I don't think I'd give up a first for any of those guys. Bogdanovich, a late first, I could see, because again, it's an expiring, very useful contract. But if you can get him for seconds, like you said, if you're not giving up anything of actual that's going to hurt you or of real consequence, then I would absolutely bring in Vanderbilt, because if you're looking for depth around the 4, he is somebody who could, like, he's 3-4, but defends, stretches, hits the glass hard, like you said. He's a guy who can fit on 29 other teams and bring something to the table.
No, and as a matter of fact, and I don't think this guy is a fit for the Heat because they have so many wings, but like you mentioned with Malik Beasley, just to sort of fill people in, before the Denver Nuggets had their own G League team, they would farm out players to any other team's G League team, and Malik Beasley spent a season with the Sioux Falls Skyforce, the Miami Heat's G League team up there in Dakota, so the Heat have a familiarity with him. They know what he could do. If they get thin in their wing rotation because they package out a Tyler Hero, maybe in January trade a Victor Oladipo, I think that's an interesting name to the Heat because it's a player that they know something about. So my thoughts overall are, I think the Heat are who they are with the 19 players they have going to camp, way more than you need. I think like every team, especially those players coming back from Eurobasket and other places, they're going to sit their veterans during the preseason. They're sort of, to me, overscheduled with 5 preseason games. I think 2's enough. I think 4 should be the maximum. I think anything beyond that is a cash grab. Not that I have anything against cash also. Want to ask you something, though, that someone on our chat board has brought up, and I'm going to put you on the spot so that he can't call me as soon as we're done with the RedRecover.com Inside the Paint show. And Brian Walters asked a question about how the Heat there's so much money right now available in the NBA that why would a team, I think this was Brian's question, why would a team be so avoiding of the luxury tax when they're billion-dollar television deals, where we're hearing the salary cap is going to blow up next summer, it's going to be one of those years, that the Miami Heat could add a 15th standard player on their roster. They could fill out their power rotation to be in a better position. So, Kurt, take us through, and I want not only take us through how the mechanics work, but just also your thoughts. We're seeing several teams drawing the line at 14 players in their standard roster, 1 below the maximum. Is Mickey Harrison being cheap? Are these other owners being cheap? No. I know it's about business, but there seems to be just oodles of money oozing from the NBA.
First off, that 14th spot, not filling it, leaves you some flexibility for a down the line move. You do not have to create that roster spot. You don't have to eat any salary. It gives teams like the flexibility of having that spot. So they can bring somebody in if there's an injury or something, or some player's not filling the role you thought. You're like, hey, when we're going to go get player X, you can make a 2-for-1 kind of trade and fill some gaps. So teams like that flexibility. As for the tax part, look, there is a lot of money out there, and the owners are getting a little more of a flow of it right now. Because remember, during the pandemic, they were paying and not getting cash coming in, right? Like there were empty buildings for a while. The way the salary cap is structured over the next couple of years, the 10 million in the salary cap is expected to go up next year is pretty much the max it can go up. I think it's 10.4 is the max it can go up.
Right.
Because they're limiting it, trying to get some money back from what they lost. And this has been negotiated with the players and the players union. But there is a lot of money flowing in. But the other thing is for owners, outside of just their general, they're trying to make money. They're the general avoid. They're capitalists who generally would like to avoid the word tax. Beyond that, it's the tax itself is cumulatively punitive. Like, the longer you're in the tax, the steeper that gets. If you're in the tax for multiple years, you start paying a penalty for being in there. So teams don't want to start that clock.
Okay.
Until they now in Miami's case, you might want to say, hey, we are contenders. We should be in the mix. We should be a team that's up there and paying that. And I think you can make that valid argument, but teams are hesitant to go into that number because they feel like once they start the clock, there's a limit and it starts to get really punitive. And unless you want to be Steve Ballmer or Joe Lacob and just shrug and deal with it, it starts to hit your bottom line.
And just to go to the chat board again, because it's something I've heard. This again is a question from Brian. He's bringing up Russell Westbrook as it relates to the Lakers. And Kurt, you're probably the same way I am. I get up early in the morning, go through whether it's Hoops Hype, my Twitter account, see what's out there. And we're at the time of the year where anyone throws anything out there, see if it gains traction. There was a rumor a couple of weeks ago that if there's any place, I think this came out of Chicago, maybe might have been heavy.com, that could rehabilitate Russell Westbrook, it's the Miami Heat, and it would make sense. And all of a sudden, my Twitter feed and my DMs are being loaded up with how Russell Westbrook would work for the Miami Heat. Getting beyond the salary and how to make that work, because it can't. Let me ask you a simple question. You've seen him out there. You're out in LA. You've watched the Lakers through thick and thin. At some point, we have to make a decision on a player, whether he can be redeemed or whether he's a shot player that for all his athleticism and what he had when he was younger, hey, at some point it happens to all of us, whether we're losing our hair or losing our jumps or whatever, it's who we are. Can Russell Westbrook still be a viable NBA player, Kurt, number one? Two, can he be a viable rotation component on a contender from what you've seen out there in LA where you're based?
Physically, yes, he can. Like, you still put up like 18 points a game last year. Like, he can still get buckets. He is still an NBA level scorer. The problem is he good enough to still play in the NBA? He absolutely is. He can absolutely make a difference. The problem is fitting in. The problem is playing a role. Russell Westbrook is Russell Westbrook because, frankly, just in part because of the way he plays, the aggressive style he plays with, the swagger, the belief in himself that he had since, like, the first time I saw him play, I went to UCLA to go watch this guy named Kevin Love, who was supposed to be really good, and walked out of the building going, who's that guy? Like, where did this guy? And he went to high school out here, and I didn't know anything about him. Russell Westbrook, the way he carries himself, the problem is because of that, he isn't willing to accept. He's kind of a sixth man right now, right? Like, he needs to accept the role. And part of the big problem last year in Los Angeles was he wasn't defending and would get angry when he was called out in meetings. He would get frustrated. He was not happy being called out in meetings for what was blatantly horrible defense. Right. He demanded to bring the ball up. You got LeBron James on the team, man. The offense runs through LeBron James, right? Like, he is your point guard. Russell Westbrook wasn't happy with his role there, and then he started to pout, and this whole thing's kind of spirals. If that hasn't changed, then I don't know where you fit him in Miami culture, right? Because or anywhere. Like, I don't know how he fits unless you want to put him on a bad team and let him just put up numbers.
Like Washington 2 years ago when he was getting his triple doubles every night and everyone said he was resurrected. And that goes back to what you were telling me, whether you're looking at what's going to happen with the Utah Jazz right now with Colin Sexton, what you've seen happen with Houston with Michael Porter Jr., that you always are going to sort of get a player. Someone has to score. Even if your team only scores 90 points a game, someone still has to score in the 20s. So there'll always be a player like that. My question with Russell Westbrook, though, is this. Miami has rehabilitated everyone. Certainly there is no set person behind Kyle Lowry at point guard for the Miami Heat who you could say, we ain't budging this guy. And that's no offense to Gabe Vincent right now. So if Russell Westbrook is even, let's say, bought out, don't think it's going to happen because it could be a trade chip. Russell Westbrook is the Miami Heat's backup point guard, not giving up a damn thing because the Lakers say, we're just sick of this guy coming in. Could that work?
Again, if he accepts the role, and I just don't know that he's there yet. He also, by the way, he has not given up a penny on a buyout. Like Russell Westbrook doesn't want to be bought out and play for the minimum. Like he does not want to be that guy. So I think the challenge with Westbrook is just getting him. Not everybody is Vince Carter, right? Like not everybody kind of gracefully accepts that their role has changed and they have to be something different over time. Westbrook has not gracefully accepted
Carter,
that.
I want to interrupt you there for a second for this reason. If Russell Westbrook is traded, it will be ostensibly for teams to get the Lakers 2 unprotected first-round picks.
Yes.
Almost wherever he is traded, whether you're hearing about the Knicks, whether we're hearing about the Jazz, wouldn't that team almost assuredly either buy him out or tell him to stay home?
Yeah. Oh, that is a $47 million expiring contract who happens to have a player attached at this point. Like
right.
And that's, again, like I said, I think he can still play in the NBA. I think there could be a role for him, but that's not how the market views him. The teams that you were talking about trading him to, San Antonio kind of comes up a lot because they'll have cap space. Utah, those teams are cut. Those teams are just buying him out. They're just waving him. And,
right.
if he's not going to help them out, then yeah, they're going to send him home. Nobody is talking about bringing him in as a key player for a role right now, which is why, look, remember his split with the agent,
yes.
Tad Future?
Right.
Remember, when was the last time we saw an agent on the way out be like,
publicly,
Russell's got to publicly, like Russell has to accept, to me.
And I sort of just wonder, and I want to bring
right?
this full circle just to talk at the end about, imagine if the Heat did get Russell Westbrook. And we lived that moment in last year's Eastern Conference Finals, last season's Eastern Conference Finals, Game 7, when Jimmy Butler comes down and because he's so confident, pulls up and shoots and bricks a 3, and the Heat are eliminated. Can you imagine having Jimmy on one end pulling up for bad threes, Russ on the other end pulling up for bad threes? Whatever's left up here would assuredly be gone, having to watch those two side by side. But we'll leave it right there. When we come back on redrecover.com Inside the Paint, I almost feel like we should get Sean Stanley to put up a ticking clock in one of the corners here. The Tyler Hero extension. We're now 1 month out just about from that deadline. Will it happen? Should it happen? Believe it or not, folks, even out in LA, Kurt has all the answers for you. And we're back on the redrecover.com Inside the Paint Show. If you missed either of our first 2 segments, heck, go to the podcast and listen to them at your leisure. I'm Ira Winderman from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. He's Kurt Helin from Pro Basketball Talk and NBCSports.com. And want to, first of all, thank everyone who's chiming in on the YouTube chat board. People like Brian and others who are on our super chat. We're paying attention. We'll try to get to all of these. We're also trying to address some topics now that we're about 10 days away from the start of camp. That October 18th is when the NBA tells teams either you extend your rookie scale players or you wait till July 1st and do it next summer. And it's always a tough decision for this reason. In almost all cases, when you issue a major or even maximum extension to such a player, they become untradeable for the balance of that season due to the poison pill factor in the NBA salary cap. Miami Heat have a decision like that on Tyler Hero. And I think, Kurt, it's more complex, and we talk about this almost every week for this reason. You're not talking about a player who has been a starter. You're talking about a player who you don't know will be a starter. You're talking about a player at a position you're fairly loaded with anyway, with Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry and Victor Oladipo. But you're also talking about an older roster, Kyle Lowry 36, 37, Jimmy Butler 33, Dwayne Dedmon older, how you want to build and bridge to your future. So I'm not sure that Andy Ellisberg has had more complex factors at his little beautiful mind numbers board trying to figure out this one. Kurt, as we get within a month, with all those factors in play, do you think, and again, I love asking these multiple questions so I can read the chat board while you're talking, do you think the Heat should offer the extension to Tyler ahead of the deadline? Do you think the Heat will offer the extension to Tyler ahead of the deadline? Kurt and I have already talked basically in the $20 to $25 million a year range. Kurt, where do we stand now a month out?
I don't think anything has changed much since we last talked. I think that wisely, unlike some other recent moves, they're going to wait this thing out, right? Unlike RJ Barrett, they're going to, right? I think they're smart.
But wait out to when? Wait out to the deadline on October 18th, or wait out to next summer in restricted free agency?
Oh, no. Wait at least till the deadline. And even then, aren't you thinking, Ira, if you're in the front office there, if you're, whatever role you're going to have, Ira, in the Heat front office, aren't you thinking, if I can get him on a really team-friendly deal, I'm going to put that out there. But if he's not going to take that, and I'm not sure that he should, I'm going to wait till, I'll go into restricted free agency and bring him back. I'll wait till next summer, because there might be a trade at the deadline that I want to make.
Kurt, it's interesting. I want to respond to that because I don't think it's about the money at all in the Tyler deal. I don't think it's a matter of if he gets 20 Jalen Brunson money, if he gets 25, which would be Jaylen Brown money, something like that. I think it's only about the roster flexibility. I think it's only talking to people inside the Heat that they think there could be a blockbuster trade available, and you need trade chips to make those blockbuster trades. So I don't think the Heat will put out, hey, if he takes a team-friendly deal, that if Tyler Hero agrees for 4 years and $98 million, here's the pen, here's the paper, go ahead and sign it. I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it has to do with having the flexibility when you look at this Miami Heat roster. Matter of fact, Kurt, I'll throw it back to you here. And I know people don't like when I throw quick questions and you got to think on your toes. But Miami Heat, attractive and gettable players. In other words, you could tell me all you want how you'd love to have Bam Adebayo, but I think we both agree. Once Durant came and went, the Heat weren't trading Adebayo. Because I don't think they were trading Adebayo even for Durant. So can you even give me another attractive, alluring Miami Heat gettable player other than Tyler Hero? I'll let you go through the roster in your mind a little.
I don't think there's anybody on his level. I mean, there's players you might, and we've talked about Caleb Martin or whoever, who you might like, who can fit in, and Max Strus can help teams, right? But he's not moving the needle for teams. He is a guy you throw in and you're like, hey, that was a nice get. I'm glad we got Max Strus in there because he can help us a little bit. But he's not moving the needle on a trade. The reigning sixth man of the year, who brings swagger and brings shooting and brings some shot creation to the table, is a different animal. Like Tyler Hero moves the needle. He's a little bit divisive, but there are teams that really would see a role and a long-term role for them, for Tyler Hero, in a way. I don't think there's another, again, outside of Bam, who you're not moving, there's not another young guy on that roster who makes that impact.
And the other part of it, and Big O's spoken about this in his childhood down here, there used to be an ice cream place called Zips, which was incredibly sticky, and you would make your own sundae. So you basically get a small bowl of ice cream, eat all the ice cream, and then just keep pouring crap in that bowl because they'd let you get an unlimited amount. It's almost to me like if you trade for Tyler Hero, you can make your own sundae because then you get to write his contract. So in other words, you're not taking a contract for Tyler the Heat have written. You can put it in your own terms of how you want to get that contract done. So to me, that's another reason why you don't extend him. So I want to go back. This is to our first segment today on the redrecover.com Inside the Paint Show. We spoke about the Phoenix Suns. We spoke about Robert Sarver. We spoke about Jay Crowder and what they might do. But to me, the litmus test of what you might do with Tyler and asking him to wait is what happened to DeAndre Ayton and how you made him wait. And he had to go out and get an offer sheet for the money he wanted, although 1 year less, from the Indiana Pacers, how we went back to Phoenix, and we've heard pretty much in the last month or so, everything is hunky-dory. It's all, hugs and kisses, and we're all back to normal for now. How much do you think that takes out of a relationship, putting a human being, putting a player on hold for a year? Or do you think, like Tyler told me when I spoke to him this summer, how he knows it's a business. He has an agent for that reason. He just plays.
Yeah, they all say that. I think it really does depend on the person. I think that there are guys who would take offense. They don't want me. If they wanted me, if I was part of their future, they are going to pay me and pay me a lot. And I think that that's part of them in Phoenix with Ayton. I think that that's part of them winning him back. I watch him have a larger role this year. Watch them give him a chance to play a bigger role in their offense, which he wants and has been very public about wanting, but also they kind of need, because they needed to do something. They didn't do anything this offseason. So it's, more Cam Johnson, more DeAndre Ayton. I don't know if that's the case with Tyler. I think if Tyler understands the situation, goes to camp, and if he comes back next year and he ends up with he goes to restricted free agency and the Heat finally offer him a deal or match whatever's out there and keep him, I think he likes playing in Miami. And you're closer to this than I am. He seems
Who
to
the
like.
hell wouldn't? Who the hell wouldn't want to play for a winning franchise who's about the playoffs, who has no state income tax and has this kind of weather out there? Here's my compromise.
If you're single and 20 and making good money, Miami's a really good place to live.
Well,
man.
He does have the girlfriend, the Instagram model. He does have one kid on the way and one kid, so maybe a little different, but there's still opportunities for fun here. Here would be my compromise, but I want to throw sort of a last loop at the end here and throw it back to you. I think what I would do is, if I was the Heat, is I would sit down with Andy Ellisberg and Pat Riley, maybe Adam Simon, Nick Harrison, and say, you know what, Tyler? We don't know who you are as a starter, but we do know this. If you thrive as a starter, your contract will be larger down the road because people pay starters more. Why don't we do this? We're going to start you this season. We're going to give you that platform. We're going to give you that runway. Let's both see how it works out. Because why stop here at 4 at 100? Maybe you are Jaylen Brown. Maybe you deserve that kind of money on that kind of extension. So I would say that, number one, I think that's a very good front office strategy. But there's part two here. Then you have Eric Spoelstra, the mad scientist, who wants to coach his team the way he wants to coach it. Can you, as a front office, tell a player he's going to be a starter and then have a coach who might go, Tyler's really good at six man. It works again. Victor Oladipo has waited his turn. He's a former starter. I want to either go that way, or I want Max Strus's three-point spacing, because that has worked now for the last 3 or 4 years between Duncan and Max. So can the front office tell Tyler he's going to be a starter, or is that encroaching on Eric Spoelstra's ability to coach the team in the way he wants to coach it?
I think it's more coordinated in Miami than that. This does happen, right? There are certainly teams where trades are made either, and the coach is told, you've got to play this guy, you've got to give this guy minutes, or you'll see this has happened with Thibodeau recently. Like, hey, we're gonna trade this guy out from under you to take this crutch away and force you to play our young guys, or force your actions in some other way. I think it's a little more coordinated in Miami, though. I think that if that's the front office conversation with Tyler Hero, and I think, by the way, that's a really smart move. Spoelstra's in on it. Spoelstra's part of this, and it says, all right, let's give him a chance. Now, if we get to Christmas and it's not working, hi, Max. Welcome back to the starting line, right?
Yes.
The option to change this is always there.
Give your other players the best chance to win, because you know what this is about? It's about Jimmy Butler. And putting Jimmy Butler, who's given heart and soul, even for a lot of money, his best chance at his age to win. So I agree with that. Want to go to the chat board before we get out of here? Eric Storm says, you couldn't pay me enough to live in Florida where it's 1,000 degrees and humid. No, thank you. Hey, just because El Diablo sits on my front porch when I open the door every day doesn't mean it's that hot here. Hey, but on the other hand,
we've had Miami. I'm in Southern California. It's felt like Miami here the last week.
Exactly. You're dealing with that. Whatever. With the wildfires, we don't have that. But you know what, Eric? Here's the beauty. RedRecover.com inside the paint. You can listen to it anywhere. So enjoy it wherever you are. Got a question here real quick. And again, I hate to do this at the end and jam it together. Donardo Joseph asks, is there still a chance for John Collins or Miles Turner? My thought, Kurt, is when you get this close to camp, you ride what you have and see how it plays out. But let me ask you this. Is there any chance, do you think, in this time frame, before the start of the regular season, we see either John Collins or Miles Turner traded?
Turner, the slim chance. Collins, I'd be shocked if it happens before camp. Now, I will add this. I think there's like a 5% chance Miles Turner and Buddy Hield are members of the Pacers past the trade deadline. I don't think either of them are going to be there.
Okay.
But in the short timeline, like in the run-up to camp or even maybe the run-up to the start of the season, I'm not sure it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think the big moves, once we saw Durant and Mitchell, the league wants to exhale and saying, okay, we know where things stand, and then we'll go, and sort of, run it back what we have. Then we can decide what we need to have. On the way out, and again, we spoke about this at the top of the show. Please go listen to our podcast, redrecover.com, Inside the Paint. Adam Silver will come out at some point this week and address the Robert Sarver issue. He basically was the one who issued the 1-year suspension for the owner of the Suns for his reprehensible, misogynistic, and racist comments, and a $10 million fine, the most you can fine, no matter how rich the owner is. So really quickly here, Kurt, in a minute or so on the way out, what do you think Adam Silver says when all the questions at his Board of Governors press conference are about Robert Sarver? What's going to be the league's public face?
That's a really good question because I'm curious to see it, but I think that they're going to say the line that got me out of the report maybe most, and I put this in my kind of commentary story on it that is at the top of NBC Sports NBA page right now. They talked about, the report said there wasn't animus, there wasn't racial and misogynistic animus on the part of Sarver. I'm like, I don't know how you do that for 17 years and not, right?
Right.
If you're saying this stuff for 17 years, you're kind of a racist, you're kind of a misogynist. I think the league's position is going to be kind of like, oh, he's just an old school boy. They're not going to phrase it that way, but that's kind of, I think, what they're going to go with, and they're going to slap him on the wrist.
Yeah, I'm sure Adam Silver will talk in legal circles about this was the most we can do. I am sure he will cast it at this is maximum penalty, just like the NFL has done in the Washington case also, is you cast it as this is a harsh penalty. This is a year. This is a contender of which he'll get to celebrate none of it, in which he has to be on the side, and $10 million is going to charity. The NBA always does that with its fines when you think something is totally wrong and goes there. But I would keep an eye on the Suns. I will keep an eye on the players. I think it's going to be interesting. Again, next week will be our final RedRecover.com show before the start of training camp. I will be at a fancy location the first week of training camp. The Heat will release that soon enough, so I'll be talking to you possibly from offshore in 2 weeks from now. So tune in again next Wednesday, 9 a.m., or as Kurt likes to say, 6 a.m. in the goddamn morning out in Los Angeles for our next RedRecover.com Inside the Paint show. Thanks, everyone on the chat board. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you here next week, and you'll catch me Friday here on the Big O Show on our next Acura Pembroke Pines report as the Big O Show rolls on.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.